Hi, everyone. Thank you all for attending today. I'm Nicole Jarvis. I'm a Senior Manager of Programs at Cancer and Careers, and I'll be today's host for this webinar. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items related to accreditation. Today's webinar is accredited for CEUs by ANCC, NASW, the New York State Education Department State Board for Social Work, the California Board of Registered Nursing, and the Society for Human Resource Management. If you plan on receiving continuing education credit for this program from any of these accrediting bodies, please proceed with the following steps. First, you must log in individually. Participants who listen in on someone else's line will not receive credit. Second, you must complete and submit the evaluation and post-test, as well as receive a passing grade on the post-test. Following today's session, you'll receive an email with all of this information. The follow-up email will be sent by 5 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, Thursday, April 8th. And certificates will be emailed within 4 to 6 weeks. Also, please note that the planners and presenters for this program have not disclosed any pertinent financial relationships or conflicts of interest, and that no commercial support was provided for this program. Thanks in part to direct support from Genentech, HSN, and QVC, Cancer and Careers is able to offer this 7th year of the Balancing Work and Cancer webinar series. This program was created in order to provide patients and survivors, as well as their care teams and employers, with concise, targeted information around the work-related issues that arise after a cancer diagnosis. Additionally, we'd like to recognize Cancer and Careers year-round sponsors who support all of our core programs and allow us to continue providing all of our resources and services free of charge. So there are many components to looking for work. A resume remains an essential tool in the job search process. Whether you're changing careers, returning to work after time off, or simply looking to highlight specific skills and experience, your resume tells your story. This is why it's so important to understand how to make an effective document that's going to work for you and is going to help you to stand out from other job seekers. Today, we'll focus on how to best structure your resume to show your professional experience and accomplishments, explain how to format it to highlight your strengths, and provide techniques to better define and explain your abilities. We understand each of you may have further questions, so we will have some time for those at the end of the hour. All questions that you'd like answered should be entered into the Q&A box located on the top or the bottom of your screen. Please don't ask questions for Julie in the chat box. Please put them in the Q&A box. If you're joining us via the phone today, you can press *9, which will alert us of your question. Now, to take us through today's topic, I'm thrilled to introduce Julie Jansen. Julie's a speaker, trainer, coach, and author who has helped thousands of professionals find success and satisfaction at work, as well as finding work that's gratifying. She's written 2 books as well, but most important to us, Julie is one of the original coaches at CAC, helping patients and survivors with their individual employment challenges. Additionally, Julie is the coach who does our resume review service, which many of you might find helpful after today's webinar. Following today's presentation, there will be time for you to ask questions, as I mentioned, but for now, I'd like to turn it over to Julie to get us started. Julie?
Thanks, Nicole. I appreciate it. So, okay, so I'm having a little trouble moving the slides. So if someone could help me, I apologize. So managing the psychological aspects of a job search is really difficult. And often I find that writing your resume is one of the biggest obstacles to getting started. Your resume should definitely be updated regularly so you're not faced with having to do a giant overhaul. However, most people forget to do this. In fact, this morning, I got an email from someone who said her husband needed a resume. He hadn't updated it in 17 years and he needed it by Friday. And unfortunately, I was unable to help her because of my other deadlines. You don't want to be caught in that position. So today's webinar is going to dig into every element of writing your resume. And as Nicole mentioned, we will definitely have time for Q&A. Let me just give you a little history about the resume before we dig into some of the how-tos. The origin of the resume actually began if you could go back, the origin of the resume began in feudal England, actually, as a letter of introduction from a lord or a head of a guild when a man traveled from one part of a kingdom to another. It eventually evolved to becoming what was called a curriculum vitae, or a CV, which means a course of one's life. And in Europe, they still tend to use the word CV. And it finally became known as a resume, which is French for summary. Generally speaking, most people, even if they call it a CV, have tended to move to the American resume format. So let's think about your resume and how you should look at it. First of all, your resume is absolutely a marketing document that captures your history, of course, but more important, it needs to highlight your achievements so that a prospective employer will think that you can do the same things for them. Your resume needs to sell you before you actually talk to an employer. It can be really difficult. If someone could help me with the slides, I apologize. It can be really difficult to remember everything you've done in your career. So some of the tools that you can use are job descriptions for jobs you've held and your past performance reviews, if you've gotten them, that highlight some of your achievements. It's also a good idea to read online job postings to pinpoint keywords and phrases so that you can then incorporate these into your resume. And we'll talk a little bit later about ATS software. And finally, I love this tip. I highly recommend creating what I call a master resume. That's something that's on your computer in a document where you dump everything you've ever done. And then later, when you actually need to finalize your resume, you can use this document to cut and paste onto the resume that you create for specific jobs. And it's ideal, of course, to do this while you're working. And as I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, 90% of people do not do this, and then they need to scramble to try to remember everything when they actually need a resume. So when you're writing an effective resume, here's some basics. Do not expect by any means that everyone will read every word. In fact, most people don't read every word of a resume ever. Basically what they do is they skim through your resume, believe it or not, spending only between 6 and 30 seconds. And their ultimate goal is just to decide whether they're going to put it in the yes pile for screening. And this is if you get past ATS screening. So your goal is just to help the person decide, yep, I want to talk to them. And it's very important to keep your reader's attention, whatever they are reading on your resume, to avoid using long paragraphs, long sentences, or large blocks of text. So don't use personal pronouns on your resume. Your resume is the only job search document where you do not use personal pronouns. You want to be wary of avoiding weak kinds of verbs like helped and assisted and was involved and coordinated. Instead, use more assertive verbs like led and managed and directed and collaborated and things like that. For anybody who is entry level, a one-page resume is the format to go. And I'm actually just working on an entry-level resume where someone's graduating from NYU, and if you're entry level, you don't put your high school on it after you've graduated from college. You put your high school on it if that's your highest degree. And then for everybody else, you would want a 2-page resume. And then the people that have 3 pages or longer tend to be someone who's at the very top of their career in a C-level position, or often I'll see academic or science or medical resumes that tend to be 3 pages. You are absolutely fine with leaving off or consolidating any of your earlier jobs. People ask that question a lot when they're concerned about age. It's not necessary to put every single job you've ever had on your resume, particularly if you're hitting 20 years of experience or more. And remember that while a lot of job titles are the same, there's also certain industries that have unique job titles. And so you want to make sure that your job titles, if you have a funky job title, that you can put in parentheses a job title that's more universally used. So one thing that is really important that's on every resume is what's called either a profile or a summary. That is where the person reading your resume and also being scanned is where you have the most relevant information about you as a candidate. And that is one of the few areas of a resume where, you know, someone will read the complete summary. It's really going to be, there'll be a sample, but there's really going to be like three or four sentences at most. Most people will look at your resume and they'll look at your name, they'll look at your geographic location, they'll look at your summary, they might look at where you work and then your education and then flip through. Definitely you want to use keywords for ATS software. ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System. And these should be limited really to technical terms rather than softer qualities. We'll talk about ATS in greater depth in a few moments. And then this is really, really important too. And I don't see enough of this on resumes. 80% of your content should be achievement statements versus responsibilities. So what I often see is big, long lists of responsibilities. Your resume is not a job description, it's a marketing document. And then if you can quantify your achievements or accomplishments, please do try to do so. So the person who reduced turnover by 25% in 6 months is much more impressive than the one who merely reduced turnover. Avoid using cliche phrases like team player or effective communicator or detail oriented. There's probably many more compelling ways to talk about those things. You definitely also want to add a headline similar to what's on your LinkedIn profile that really is just one line, and it can be altered and adapted to whatever the title of the job is that you're applying for. Your education and certifications, unless you're entry level, always are listed after your work experience. And this is a particularly important point for many of you who are participating in this webinar. And that is that if you've got gaps in your work experience, or you just haven't worked in a while because you've been going through treatment, or you've left your job, or you've left your job because of COVID now, you want to put volunteer and community service on your resume and put some detail, put achievements with your volunteer and community service, not just listing the organization and volunteer, because that's a powerful place where you can put transferable skills. And then finally, I would say professional memberships, trade association memberships, those are all great things to add as well. So writing your resume is one of the challenges. Is it has to be attractive too. So the next slide. Oh, okay. So a resume should be visually appealing. There's certain fonts that I tend to like, that like Calibri, Arial, Helvetica, Garamond, that are easier to read than say, for example, Times New Roman, which is one that used to be used a lot. And people don't list full addresses any longer on their resumes. The reason primarily is because of privacy issues and identity theft. And then I see this so often when I do the resume review service, that people tend to list their references on their resume. And the last thing your references want is their phone number and their name and any other that type of information listed on a resume that goes out to all sorts of people. So now let's kind of go one level deeper and look at action verbs. So there's tons of them. One of the things I find challenging as a resume writer is that it's really easy to keep using the same ones over and over again. So this is a really handy list that gives you lots of options, and hopefully you'll remember that you can refer to this, but lots of different ways that you can say things. So you're not just saying manage, 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 lead, and so the next slide is really, how do you write accomplishment statements? This is one of the challenges that people really have quite often. They know what they do in their job. They might know about like one accomplishment, but it's really hard for a lot of people to think of 3 or 4 or 5 for each of their jobs that they've had. So these are some questions that you can actually ask yourself. And resume writers actually use simple formulas like a PAR, which stands for problem, action, result. What was the problem that you wanted to solve? What was the action that you took to solve it? And what was the result? And as you recall earlier, I mentioned quantifying a result if you're able to do that. So this list of questions, just to go through it pretty quickly, is some things that you can ask. Did you accomplish something but use fewer resources or not have to add resources, whether it's money or people? Did you get any awards or special recognition? People often forget to put awards on their resume. And there's an award section on LinkedIn too, which is good. Did you increase efficiency or solve problems? Did you achieve something in your job or for the company that was a first? And did you develop or design or create or invent something? And if you kind of max it out and say, how did I do it? What were the results? Why was it important? How did I do it? What were the results? I kind of say the so what piece. That helps a lot in being able to think of what you've accomplished. So on the next slide, there's more questions that, everybody has different jobs, so there's different things that are important. Not everybody saves their company money, but did you increase sales? Have you been promoted? Did you increase production? Did you identify a problem that other people didn't see or they saw and they never tried to solve it? So those are some great questions that you can ask yourself when you're trying to develop accomplishment statements. So on the next slide, this is going to be, I think this is one of the most useful parts of this webinar. And this is actually an example of an accomplishment. So this was an administrative person and she needed to write an accomplishment. So she said she had a job as an administrator working for two different managers, and she was asked to oversee the expense approval process, which was very cumbersome when she walked into the job. And it was for 15 employees who had to, submit their expenses. And so she kind of thought about what the problem was. And here on this slide, she saw that there were actually 3 forms that had to be filled out. One was on a newer system, and the other 2 were on an older system that was eventually going to go away. And all the employees hated doing their expenses. They wouldn't fill out the forms. They were late in submitting them. And so finance was constantly chasing her because she was the point person. So she thought of the problem. And then on the next slide, it's what did she do about it? So she said, it made perfect sense for me to consolidate these 3 forms by creating one form with all of the necessary information. She then talked to her 2 managers about it and, obviously said, let's keep it on the new system. And then she just thought about, the obstacles. And one of her managers was really gung-ho about the idea. The other one didn't really care, wasn't that interested. So then she went on to, on the next slide, she went on to quantify it. So excuse me, 8 months after she implemented the new form on the new system, 100% of the employees were actually submitting their expenses on time, which gave her time to focus on other things, not be chasing employees for their expenses and not getting nagging emails from finance. And it was an easier process. So that's a great example of an accomplishment that if she had not broken it down. And so here's how it was written. And it's a little lengthy, it could be shortened a bit, but and I won't read the whole thing to you, but she basically redesigned the monthly expense submissions for 2 departments, 13 employees. She streamlined it, improved productivity, and accelerated the payment cycle. So it's a really nice achievement for her. So then looking at your abilities, the reason for this is an ability is a skill. They're important to identify less for your resume, more so you can talk about them rather in interviews and your cover letters while you're networking. So once you have your accomplishment statements, you can then look and say, well, what were my abilities that I used for each accomplishment statement? And so if you look at the next slide, there's a list of or examples on the next slide of a list of abilities. And this is kind of small, so apologies, but there's all sorts of things. Like some of these are softer skills, like sympathy is on here. I'm not sure that's an ability. It might be empathy instead. Taking initiative, organizing, installing, problem solving. And this is kind of like a nice little activity that we have, I think we have in the job search toolbook to workbook, is that you can kind of rate yourself as far as what your abilities are. Okay, so now let's talk about the onerous, often onerous applicant tracking systems, the ATS. ATS, what is it? Well, ATS, if a company uses ATS, 75% of resumes are rejected before a human being sees it, 75%. So when people say to me, you know, I've been applying for all these jobs and I haven't gotten any responses, I don't understand why, I'm pretty sure the reason is going to be that you do not have the correct keywords on your resume. So ATS is actually software used to collect, to scan, to sort, and to rank job applications. And that includes not only the application, the resume, but also your cover letter, which is why I always recommend you write a cover letter if you have that opportunity. And what ATS actually does is it eliminates the least qualified candidates. So people always think ATS looks for the most qualified, but instead what it does, generally speaking, is it eliminates the least qualified using resume filtering bots. And then whoever's left, then they go through, and either a recruiter will scan through, or they'll do a further scan. So 95% of large companies use ATS, approximately 65% of medium-sized companies use ATS. Really small companies, a lot of privately held companies, they don't tend to use ATS. And on average, and I think this is a low number. I actually debated changing it on the slide due to the pandemic, but on average, a corporate job posting will receive up to 350 applications. What companies will do is they'll typically screen 8 to 10 applicants, and they'll often put a deadline on when they'll stop receiving applications, or they'll put a finite number of how many applications they will receive until they shut down the posting. So the best type of file to use for ATS is a .doc or a .docx. A PDF is fine. Sometimes you'll get instructions as to what format the company or organization wants. The great thing about a PDF is that it does preserve your design and your format, but it sometimes can kind of get moved around too, depending. It's because everybody uses, either they kind of buy ATS off the shelf, they kind of cobble it together. I mean, there's not just one type of ATS. Don't put your contact information in the header or footer, only because you can put your name, but not all ATS can properly read and parse information that's in the header or footer of a Word document. So that's why you want to put your contact information outside of that. And then once again, optimize, optimize, optimize. You're just pulling keywords out of job postings and putting them on your resume, so you're not making up words. A little more about applicant tracking systems. This is important, which is why we have so many slides about this topic. You want to, keywords will represent both hard and soft skills. You want to find like postings or job descriptions that you believe you're a fit for and that interest you. And then there are word cloud generators that you can use. There's one called Wordle. And what those do is they help you identify the keywords used frequently if you have trouble doing this manually. Another thing you can do is jump on LinkedIn and look at the skills and expertise section and start typing in things, and you can see what falls down in the drop-down box and see what are some of the commonly used keywords as well. So You want, this is a tricky part here. And this is what I'm challenged by as a resume writer. This slide gives you tips about how to sprinkle keywords, and sprinkle is the keyword in this slide. So using the most important keywords 2 to 3 times is important. You're not going to load it all up on top and then hope that that works, because one of the things, and I like putting, by the way, a bulleted keyword section right underneath your summary. I call it core competencies. Usually it could be areas of expertise, but that's a good way to get those keywords up on top. And so, and then finally, the last slide about ATS is you always want to spell out words and use the abbreviation, because you don't know, like if you look at job postings, and here the example is search engine optimization. Search engine optimization is rarely spelled out, but once in a while it might be. SEO is more commonly used, but every industry has acronyms, and they're specific to that industry or even to that company. And you want to make sure that your bases are covered as far as having both the acronyms or the abbreviations and the spelled out words. You definitely want to avoid images, charts, and graphics, because ATS gets confused by these. Stick to simple bullets. I still sometimes see those arrows that people used to use that were like those pointy arrows. Use a clean chronological format. So that means no columns or tables. Just a linear version. My creative clients, I just finished a watch designer's resume, and you know, he wanted something really attractive. And I always say to the creative people, you know what, if you want to design resume, you can create one that you actually email to people directly, but you don't want to use those for posting, because again, ATS can go wacky. And then there are free resume reviews. I mean, I'm a little mixed, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you which ones I think are the best. I mean, but here's some: JobScan, Skill Road's top resume. Even all of the job aggregate boards, you have resume reviews, and then they kind of try to pitch you to buy a resume, you know, rewrite. But so those are my tips about ATS. I mentioned cover letters. Cover letters are important. They actually paralyze most of my clients. It's interesting. People get very hung up on their inability to write cover letters. And yeah, cover letters are written for someone you don't know, generally speaking. Yes, you can do it in an email. You want to kind of think about it as customized direct mail. They're always scanned, as I mentioned, by ATS. And it's just an opportunity to sell yourself. So some of the guidelines here, if you can, open with something interesting. I mean, sometimes I'll write a cover letter for someone and I'll say, I'm writing because I'm interested in the blah, blah, blah position. But then I'll say, and here's the reason why. You know, so it's either the reason why is either going to be something about the company that's unique, or something about yourself that's unique, that relates to the job. So you want to try to avoid being boring, because if someone's going to read your cover letter, they're probably only going to read the first few sentences. And of course, they'll find the typos, you know. Mention something about the company always, no matter where you put it in the letter. Definitely use bullets. Just, you know, it's usually an intro paragraph, 3 bullets of how your experience is relevant, and just really pay close attention to the job posting. Keep it brief. It's no more. I mean, I've seen 3-page cover letters, not necessary. And like I mentioned, typos, proof. I mean, I'm a writer and author. Everything I write, I find a typo in. So it doesn't mean anything, you know, and you've got to proof it. And then a little bit more about cover letters. If you're doing an email, which is what most people do, just try to be thoughtful about your email subject line. I mean, don't make it too creative. And, you know, really the best email subject line you can have is Julie Jansen referred me to you. But unfortunately, you don't always have that opportunity. Put your contact information on the top of your letter or in the signature file of your email. People forget to put that in their SIG file. Most emails I get, someone just has their name. Maybe they'll have their phone number, but I'm a firm believer in, especially if you're job searching, you should have more information in your signature file in your email. And if you can follow up, if you can find the person or follow up or find someone on LinkedIn, that's obviously the most advantageous if you're able to do that. So sometimes I get this question, how is LinkedIn different from a resume? Well, if you're someone who's still resistant to using LinkedIn, and I'm doing a webinar for Cancer and Careers on, I believe it's May 7th on LinkedIn. It's time to overcome your resistance. I'm guessing it says 96% of hiring managers use LinkedIn. I'm guessing it's pretty close to 100. They might not use LinkedIn right away, but eventually they're going to look at your LinkedIn profile. So the difference between LinkedIn and your resume is your LinkedIn profile is public, your resume is private. You can definitely tailor and customize your resume all the time. LinkedIn, you can keep making changes. It's, you know, do I recommend that? People don't make changes on their LinkedIn profile quite as much, but you definitely want to keep it up to date. And LinkedIn is also, of course, a content networking and research tool. And it just is so easy for people to look at you and for you to look at people. So, and a little bit more about LinkedIn. This isn't about LinkedIn, I realize, but if you have a resume, you should have a LinkedIn profile, because it's not a mirror of your resume. It used to be that you just dump your resume on LinkedIn, upload it, and that would be it, but those days are over. So your professional headline is really important. If you're working, people tend to default to their title when they're working, but you know, I can't remember the exact number. I'll know in May when I do the LinkedIn webinar, but it's like a lot, like 240 characters or something. You have a lot of room for characters in your headline. So if you can put more words in there that describe what you do, so you could still put your title, and then you can put other words or phrases that capture everything you do, and that's scanned. A photo is absolutely a must. I don't remember the last time I've seen a LinkedIn profile without a photo. Now, sometimes you don't see someone's photo if you're not a first or second connection, but generally most people have photos now. Color is preferred, black and white is okay. It's a tiny little thumbnail anyway, and so you can't see much. There's something called I wrote a compelling summary. It's called About, and that has room for 2,400 characters. So you don't want to go on and just write a big long about section just for the sake of it. But what I'll do is I'll take someone's summary that I've written for their resume, and I'll pop it onto the about section and then list some specialties, you know, that are yet another opportunity for the keywords. And then your skills and endorsement section is really important, because it's two things. It's keywords, once again, and you have room for 50. So if you only have 13 skills listed in that section, you just want to populate it with anything and everything. So you would put search engine optimization, and then SEO, strategic marketing, and marketing, you know. And one of the things I like about that section is you can decide what your top 3 skills are, so that when someone actually views your profile, they'll see the top 3, and you want to be a little strategic about what those are. And then once they open it up a little bit more to view it, your profile, they'll see all the other ones. And the recommendations are very important, because frankly, you're not right. Well, you might write your own recommendation and someone would just post it for you, which is done. But I would say it's the one thing that really adds some nice color to your LinkedIn profile. You know, LinkedIn is now, and I'll talk about this in May, but they're really moving to lots of video, and there's a featured section where you can put video and all that stuff. But if you want a basic LinkedIn profile, which is, you know, most of you, that's all you need, then definitely get some recommendations that are current. Don't have a recommendation from 2016, you know, you want one from last year. And then finally, with LinkedIn, on this last slide, when you see people who are updated, rather posting or updating their information, like they got a new job, or, they are celebrating an anniversary, reach out to them. It's a great opportunity to just say, hey, Nicole, it was so good to see that you just celebrated your X year at Cancer and Careers. How are you doing? And it's just easy. It's an easy way to kind of stay in touch and network. And another tip is that LinkedIn automatically assigns you a public profile URL, and it's got all these little letters and numbers. And most of you are able to get your name and shorten it, either with putting a hyphen in between or something. There's lots of ways that you can review job openings, but I would say the number one way that people are getting jobs now are from their LinkedIn profile. So obviously you have to have a good resume, which is what this is about primarily, and just spend 15 to 20 minutes a day exploring LinkedIn. And again, I can get into more detail next month about that. So now I think we're going to open it up to Q&A.
Yeah, really quickly, before we jump into Q&A, I do just want to very quickly talk about some of the other resources that we have for job searching. First, I want to say thank you, Julie, for that great presentation. I know that resume writing can be really stressful, so you really broke it down in a way that I think a lot of people can use practically. So as I mentioned, we have a resume review service that is free of charge. If anything today spoke to you about how you want to reformat or highlight certain aspects of your resume that you haven't been, then certainly please do check that out. We have an online career coaching center where you can submit your questions to a career coach. Julie is one of the career coaches, and we have other coaches that participate in that as well. We have our Balancing Work and Cancer webinars and our Job Search Toolkit, which is a publication that is available for download or order and goes over a lot of the different elements and aspects of the job search process. As mentioned, some of our upcoming webinars include the LinkedIn webinar that Julie mentioned, which will be on May 5th, one on networking, and then enhancing your skills, prepping for success will be in July, and finally career change with Julie again in August. I do want to draw everyone's attention to our virtual national conference coming up this June. It will be online, free of charge, full day event, and you can feel free to register now. We have space and we'd love to have you join us for the event. I'm going to just put up here our CEU requirements, just so that any of you who are interested still have access to that. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to us regarding that. So I do want to open it up for Q&A. We have plenty of time. So if any questions that you guys have, please put them into the Q&A box or press *9 on your phone. I do see that we have a couple in the chat now, so I will read some of those, Julie, in rapid fire, and we can move through those. This first one says, I'm disabled and looking for a part-time job. How do I explain why I've been out of work since 2006? I only remember 3 employers since 2000.
Okay, so it's a multi-part question. Let me try to address every part of it. So it's okay to say that you're looking for a part-time position on your resume. What you probably don't want to do is talk about why you have gaps on your resume. Probably not in a cover letter either. So, and if you can't, I think back to 2000, was it, Nicole?
Yeah.
Which is okay because it's 2021, so you don't need to be listing, as I mentioned earlier, you don't need to be listing every single job you've ever had your whole life. So just going back to that's a long time. So that's fine. But the way you can talk about wanting a part-time job is you can just put it in the headline and just say, seeking part-time job as a data analyst or as an administrative professional or something, or you can put it in a sentence in your summary and just put you could put part-time administrative professional in your headline and then mention that you're looking for part-time work again in your summary. And a lot of employers are hiring part-time people. So it's not everybody wants a full-time job.
Definitely. And I think it's a lot more conducive to the way people live their lives now. So I think it's totally
Definitely.
understandable if that's something that you're looking for. It doesn't suggest any red flags, I think.
Yeah.
This next question is from Alejandra. For the ATS, is it recommended to use the same words as the job profile states it, or is it better to use synonyms?
So yeah, that's a really clever question, actually. So you want to do both. You definitely want to do both, because it's very tricky. You don't want to look as if you're mimicking every single word exactly the way that the job posting is listing it. So I definitely recommend at least a couple times using the same language that the job posting is using, and then definitely default to some synonyms as well. And
So
remember, I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, finish.
Remember my tip of, you want the keywords to kind of go through your whole resume if you have that experience earlier on, because one of the things that ATS does is actually scans to see how far back, and it actually gauges your level of experience with whatever it is, strange as that sounds. So that's part of the algorithms.
Okay. And so would the ATS be picking up those synonyms as well? If you were going to be using
not
different
necessarily, but it's more dangerous to just keep repeating the same exact words, because eventually it's going to end up in the hands of someone.
Yeah.
So that ATS doesn't pick up words that they're not looking for. So they pick up like years of experience, education, and language.
So this is more of just making sure that it looks like you are being
balanced.
Very strategic.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Purposeful for this company specifically.
Yes, there used to be this quick trend, thankfully it went away, where people would just take all the keywords in a job posting and they would hide it in the bottom, embed it in the bottom of their resume, and so that you couldn't see the keywords, but they were there.
Yeah, someone had actually just put that in the chat box, asking if that was something, putting them in white.
Recommended.
Not recommended.
Not
okay.
recommended. No.
All right. Good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, this question comes from Marcy. She asks, should you have the same information on your resume as you do in LinkedIn, or is LinkedIn more about the job description versus your actual achievements?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is more about the job description. I don't recommend putting achievements on LinkedIn anymore. But LinkedIn is more about, it sounds like I'm being contradictory, so let me see if I can be clear. LinkedIn is more about keywords, and a resume is about keywords and accomplishments, So the resume is the more robust marketing document. Your LinkedIn profile is a basic skeleton of all of your stuff, and then certainly your experience, and then keywords.
Okay. This isn't so much a question as a statement, but I feel like you can probably speak to it. Lisa says that she's concerned about privacy within LinkedIn.
Okay. So, LinkedIn, you can keep your profile really basic. And so I'm not sure, it's not possible for someone to, you don't have to list your contact information, for example, if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Where I do recommend that you do that, but you don't have to. And so there isn't any other information that you would put on LinkedIn that would be kind of dangerous to you, to your privacy, and affect your privacy at all. So I'm not sure like what the crux of your concern would be, Lisa,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more just keep it really basic work experience, a simple photo. Maybe don't put your contact information, your education, and leave it at that, if that's what makes you most comfortable.
Sure. And just to piggyback on that, if the concern is about privacy, about your health history or anything like that, you're in complete control of what you put on LinkedIn.
Right.
So thinking in the context of your disclosure decisions and whatnot, think about what might be suggested if you're a volunteer for a cancer organization. If you were to get a question about that, how would you want to describe your involvement? Would it just be in general terms that, cancer has always been, a an issue that you've been passionate about, or if you'd want to discuss it, but just being a little bit more prepared about, whatever you are putting on your profile that might get asked about in the event of an interview.
That's good. And I would be more wary of Facebook, hands down, more wary of Facebook than LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
This next question, is it ever okay to submit a resume to a company that's not actively seeking or do not have opportunities posted? And does anything differ with this strategy?
So you're not really submitting an application if there's not an actual posting. I would suggest that what you would be doing is, because I do suggest to clients that they create a target list of companies that they're interested in, and then, a small list, like 5 to 8 or something at most. And then they go on LinkedIn and find people they can connect with and send them a customized invitation and say, oh, I'm really interested in your company and this is why. And is there any chance we could have like an informational conversation? And then you can then find out, hopefully from them, or, of course, look at their website if there is actually any kind of real opening, but you're not really applying for anything necessarily, but it's a definite must for networking.
So in that sense, would it just make more sense to be seeking out informational interviews versus actually sending along your information prior to doing that? Okay.
Because I've seen lots of people just target companies and persist, and then finally something opens up. And now they know 3 people at the company, and so they're like, oh, we thought of Nicole, because, so that's just a good thing to do in general.
Sure. And it puts you ahead of the game in that respect too. They might not even open up applications until
companies would much rather interview people that either referred to them or that they might know, even just superficially.
Sure. This next question is from Sean. Should I respond to recruiter messages on LinkedIn if I'm not interested in the specific job that they're filling?
Yeah, this is a good question because unfortunately, what most people do is say, I'm not interested. They don't respond and they don't offer to help the recruiter find someone. And then when they're looking for a position, they're wondering, why aren't these recruiters responding to me? So developing relationships, while difficult to do, is very important to do with recruiters. So even if you're not interested, just replying and saying, I'm pretty set with where I am right now. I'm happy. I appreciate your outreach. Let me look at my network and see if there's anybody that I might be able to refer to you. And even if you can't refer someone, at least offering to do that, you'll be much more memorable. And then when you do need to work with recruiters, if it's possible, then you're just going to have a more of an advantage.
Sure. And what are your thoughts on reaching out to recruiters yourself directly? What's the best way to do that?
So most recruiters will accept invitations on LinkedIn. And as long as you're reaching out to recruiters who are, in your space, in your sector, I think that's great. I wouldn't do it just randomly, just like reaching out with the default invitation. So I would definitely customize it and say, I'm a professional in blah, blah, blah industry. And I'd like to connect with you. Even if unfortunately, people tend to do that only when they're looking for a job. But even if you're not looking for a job, I think it's much better to start connecting with recruiters in your space before you actually need to work with recruiters, But they're going to be the people that will be the most open. They don't generally tend to respond unless you're qualified for a particular search that they're working on.
Okay. It looks like Lisa actually has a follow-up question to that. What if I'm looking for a job in either of 2 fields? I wouldn't want the recruiter for one field to see that I have a lot of experience in the other field and reject me based on that.
So people, let me think about that one. You just want to be very careful about how you word, people have lots of different types of experience, So just putting it very simply on your profile, I don't think there's any harm in that. I don't think a recruiter is going to go, oh, she worked in this. So people change careers, they do different things. So I don't really see that as being an issue. And I don't think recruiters spend that much time. They're also doing searches They're using Boolean search, or they're using their own form of ATS. So
Mhm.
they're not sitting there saying, oh, Julie worked in broadcasting before she started doing what she's doing now. Oh no, I'm not going to talk to her. You know,
Mhm.
I think it's fine as long as you delineate it very carefully. What LinkedIn is challenging about is that they make you look very linear in your work experience. You know, it's
Mhm.
kind of it feels very limited. So you just
Yeah.
have to be careful with that. But I don't really see that as being an issue, especially as we move forward. More and more people are doing different things.
Yeah, and I would imagine that also some of your recommendations can speak to what your variety of skills are, so that you could be a little bit more general if you needed it. So, even
Yeah,
if it was a specific role, what other tasks did you perform, or, what did they see in you that they were, impressed by, even though it wasn't part of your role, things like that. So I guess
yeah.
I don't know how specific you can be when you're requesting your
Oh, you can. Yeah,
references, but
definitely. In fact, you do want to coach someone when you ask them to write a recommendation. Because,
okay.
like, if you take me, for example, I do career coaching, executive coaching. I write resumes. I'm a vocational expert. That's the newest part of my business. I do speaking. I do training. So it's like sometimes people just know me in one of those areas, and they're like, "Oh,
Uh-huh.
you do that, or you do that." And so it's like, if someone has experience with me, I want them to write a recommendation about being a vocational expert. They know nothing about my coaching. It's
Mm-hmm.
just you're focusing them on
Sure,
whatever it is that you want them to say.
absolutely. Okay, this next question comes from Liz, and also I just want to thank everybody for all your questions. This is great. I know that this is
Yeah, because I
really,
must have
really
talked really faster. Sorry about that.
So this next question is from Liz. She asks, do you still add the number of years you've been at each job next to your title, or the range of years?
You definitely just put the years. There's been a little bit of a trend moving back towards listing months. I'm not so much a fan of that because I don't even know why that matters. The only reason you might want to list months is because you worked in a job under a year, and say you worked from February of 2020 to November of 2020. Then sometimes people will put months, or they'll put it with internships sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't. I mean, you definitely don't want to not put any time frame, like years wise. I've just reviewed a couple resumes where someone didn't put any years and any time, and they listed 6 years, 12 years, and I was so distracted by that. I thought, why? It was odd. So yeah,
Okay, well, maybe a little suspect sometimes. Okay.
yeah, it was a red flag for sure.
Okay. This next question, I became ill during my final year of university and was diagnosed a year later. I completed treatment last year and so have a big gap of 4 years from university to present when trying to apply for jobs. How do I explain this without being seen as an unsuitable applicant, especially as I was not able to start working and have no work experience really to talk about?
Right. Yeah, I feel like I reviewed your resume, whoever's asking that. Because that sounds very familiar to me. So you just don't address it on your resume. You don't address it in your cover letter. If you need to address it in an interview, or then you do, and then you choose what you're going to say. You either say that I was ill and I'm fully recovered now. I had to step out of working for a variety of reasons. Whatever it is that you feel comfortable with, it makes you feel authentic.
Mm-hmm.
But I work with people who have 15-year gaps, because I just did a couple resumes for just two women who stayed home with their kids, and then both of them were getting divorced, and they need to go back to work. So and they didn't want to talk about their divorce, either, and so they just said, I just stepped out of the workplace and here I am, I'm back.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of them took, you take courses, like do a boot camp or something. And that's what both of these women happened to do. And they added those courses and showed a little more current stuff. They really beefed up their volunteer experience, if you've been able to do any volunteer experience given what you've been through. And that's just how you proceed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's all about how you're framing it. A lot of this stuff might have to come out during interviews, or if you need to address a glaring gap maybe in your cover letter. You can sort of speak to, I took some time off to explore different opportunities, or to, find my passions or something, being a little bit more of a, putting a different swing on it can be helpful. And I see that there's a question about caregivers with gaps in employment history. So I would say the same thing to you regarding that. Just we call it the swivel, and just really swiveling the conversation without having to give too much information. So addressing any concerns or questions, but really turning it back to what you're passionate about now and what you want to do now and what the potential is, as opposed to whatever's happened in the past. Because like Julie said, there's plenty of reasons why people might have gaps on their resume. It's not automatically like, oh, they had a health issue, they're not going to be reliable, we can't hire them. Could be a number of things. People deliberately take time off, people get laid off, you never really know. And especially now, I'm sure after COVID, we're going to be seeing a totally different type of job process, I would imagine, at least shifting a little bit in terms of how we talk about our time off. So
a year from now, nobody's going to ask about gaps ever again. I guarantee you. It's always our most popular question, right, Nicole?
It always is. And I totally understand why it is, but I also wish people weren't so worried about it.
I know, I feel that way
because
too.
At this point, it sounds like we need to be more concerned about keywords on our resume versus
well, after today's webinar, that's
so. So we have another question from Deborah. Many managers and people from our corporate office are on LinkedIn. So how do I look for a new job using this platform without them finding out?
Yeah, so the only way that you demonstrate that you're looking for a job on LinkedIn is by notifying recruiters that you're open to opportunities and filling out that little questionnaire. Otherwise, most people are on LinkedIn, even if they're not using it. I mean, it's like the stats are astounding at how many people are. And so, I mean, even if you list an employer that's some nondescript tiny little company, LinkedIn automatically creates a company page for that employer, even if that company never developed their own company page. And so pretty much everybody's on LinkedIn. So there's nothing that you're doing. I mean, you do not want to get that thing that is like the ring around your neck that says, what does it say? Open to work or whatever. That's a new feature that they came up with last year. So avoid that. Don't do that one. But otherwise, you don't have to worry. They're not going to know.
Jill asks, can you clarify the distinction between a headline, summary, and anything else that you put at the top of the resume page?
Sure. So resume. So yeah, which is what this is about, right? So the headline is either your job title, the job title that you're looking for, or, it could be like senior administrative and executive assistant. So that would be like a headline, and that goes right underneath your contact information. The summary is that brief paragraph that describes it really exactly that. It summarizes your experience in a sentence or two. I like to add a little color to it by talking about some of your traits or abilities that make you stand out or differentiate you as a professional. That's your summary. And what was the third thing?
Anything else that you put?
Anything else. So
maybe like the objective is the summary and objective.
There's not an objective. So it's just headline, summary, bulleted keyword section, work experience, education, volunteer experience, professional memberships.
And do you think that there is a benefit to having your education at the top versus the bottom, or vice versa?
The only time you put your education on the top is if you're currently working towards a degree or a certification. Like say you're trying to make a career change and to become a coder, and you're in a boot camp. You could put that up on top or in your summary. But otherwise, your education always goes after your work experience, if you've got any work experience at all.
Okay. All right, we have 2 more minutes. So I'm going to do 2 more questions. So this one is, where can I go for some good templates to start from?
I'm glad you brought up templates. Yeah, so there's lots of very pretty, fancy, nice templates online. And I see a lot of them in the resume review service. There's a couple that people tend to pick to use, choose to use. And remember what I said about ATS. So you want to be careful with these templates. I mean, I would just go and Google linear ATS friendly resume template or ATS friendly resume template and see what comes up and use that as a template versus going to those companies that have all the curly cues and the paisley and all the colorful things on the resumes, because that's not ATS friendly.
Okay. All right, and one more question. I'm a little shy about applying to jobs that have descriptions that don't fit instead of just focusing on what does fit. How do I decide on what positions to apply to?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I feel like if you have 70% of what the job posting is asking for, that you should go ahead and apply.
Okay.
I mean, what do you have to lose? I mean, worst case, you don't get a response.
Mm-hmm.
But don't, not pie in the sky. You know what I mean? Like if something like, oh, I know I would be good at that, but you don't have any experience, you're not going to get an interview.
Right.
And it's very time consuming to fill out job applications.
Yes, it is. Certainly. And I just want to address one of the questions someone asked about making a career change and what's the best way to refresh your resume. I would suggest maybe sending it into our resume review service for Julie.
That's a good idea.
And with that, I really appreciate it. We're at the top of the hour, so I just want to be mindful of the time. Thank you so much, Julie, for all of your insight today and for being a marathoner with these Q&A.
Sorry about my
I knew that it would be really great to have you available for people-specific questions. So yeah. Really appreciate it. We really appreciate the feedback that you guys would be willing to give us. So if you wouldn't mind filling out the online evaluation that will be circulating tomorrow, it really helps us to develop this program best, and it also helps us to continue to receive funding for these kinds of programs. I know we had a lot of questions answered today, but if we were unable to get to any of yours during today's call, please feel free to email us at cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we'll be sure to get the answers for you. Once again, requirements for CEUs is up here. Thank you again, Julie, for your insights, and thank you all for attending. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.